Hello, in this video let's see if we can actually get a character running around the scene. So what we need to do is import some other packages from the standard assets. So let's go up to Windows and the asset store here, and I will do my thing where I kind of tear this off, and so it's, I've got a little more, there we go, it's a little easier to work with. So what we want to do is go find the standard assets again, which you've already downloaded. You're not going to have to re-download them. There we go. And let's click on the standard assets. And now it says import because we've already downloaded them. So let's click on that. And this is going to take a bit. It's going to decompress the thing, and it's going to give us a list of the stuff that we're going to import. Then we're going to select the things that we do want this time and import them. Then we're going to get an error that we're going to have to go fix, and then hopefully that'll work. Okay, so we've got the package contents listed for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select none, and now let's scroll through here. We want to find three things. We want to find characters. So let's select characters. Actually, we want all of that stuff. Why is it not? Should select all of that. That is really aggravating. Why is it not selecting the character? Oh, because I've already imported the characters. So you want, for you guys, just click characters and it'll all select. You also want to select cross-platform import. Check that, and that'll all get checked out. You want to import that. So I've already imported it. That's why it's not showing up for me. And then the third package you want to import is utility. So keep scrolling down, and you want to find the utility package and click on that. And I'm assuming it is toward the bottom, assuming they're all in alphabetical. There you go. Utility. So you need characters, cross-platform import, and utility. So select those three checkboxes and then click import. And then you will get this error message right here about GUI text is obsolete. GUI text has been removed. Use UI.text instead. So let's go double click on that error message, and it'll open up Visual Studio here. And what it said was that GUI text is now obsolete, and we should just use text instead. So let's delete that. And then the problem is that the text object is defined in unity.ui, I believe. There you go. And no, all right. I think I found the. Let's see, Unity engine.ui. Okay, there we go. Unity engine.user interface. Okay, there we go. Now let's save that. So all I did was I added this line here, and I changed GUI text to text. This is just an unforgivable error from Unity that we have to go in here and fix code to get the standard assets to work. But we do, and now this should rebuild, and hopefully we will not see any errors. Oh my God, it worked. Okay, so now you can see that error message is gone. And now what we can do is we want to add a first-person character controller to this scene. So let's go find, in our project menu here, let's go look and see if we can find something that looks like a first-person character controller. So that is probably be in prefabs. So let's look in the prefab section here. And do we see anything that looks like a first-person character controller? Oh my gosh, we do. There it is, FPS Controller. So watch this. We can actually drag this right into our scene. And unfortunately, it is now like stuck in the ground. So let's kind of lift the character controller out of the ground. And I think it is also facing the wrong way. So it's kind of, but that's okay. So we'll deal with that in a second. So there's our first-person character controller. Now, the first-person character controller actually has a camera component on it, right? So now we actually have two cameras in our scene. We've got the camera that was in here when the game started or when the scene started, and we've got the camera component that is on the player. This is a problem because when figuring out how the sound works, Unity's not going to know which camera to use. So it's going to spam out errors into the console if we just leave that there. Actually, let's just run it and see if we get the errors. There we go. You can see it's spamming out these errors. So why is it spamming out these errors? It's spamming out these errors because there are two cameras. So let's go. We can either just disable this object or we could just delete it. We don't really need it anymore. But I'll just leave it in there, and I'm going to disable it. So this little checkbox right here at the top, on the top right here, on the left side, I'm just going to uncheck that, and that camera is now deactivated. And then let me come down to the bottom here. I'm going to clear the console, and now if I run this, you'll see we don't get those error messages. There we go. And there's our first-person character controller. All right, awesome. And now we can walk around our terrain. This is pretty cool. There's our like mountain. Where'd our mountain go? I guess it's over there. Way over there. Now, whee! All right. Yep. I'm gonna do it. What? Ah! Okay. So how do I stop that from happening? Well, okay. So I think the terrain is a little small, but that's okay for what we're using it for. If this were a real level, what we could do is build up kind of really steep mountainous areas around the edge, or put water or some barrier that the player's not supposed to be able to cross. So how can we do that? What's the cheap way to do that? In this scene, I'm just going to put in a box collider. So let's do that. Let me add an empty object, game object. There it is, 3D. Let's put in create empty. There we go. Create an empty object. And watch this. I'll put this thing kind of on the right edge of the board. And then what I'll do is add a component to it, and I'll put in a box collider. And now what I can do is I can size the box collider to be really big, so the player, the box collider is like way down there. Okay, how do I get the box collider to be where I need it to be? Well, let's put it at 0, 0, 0, and then I think we raised our terrain up by 100, right? So there's our box collider. It's kind of on the edge of the terrain now. So we just kind of remembered, the terrain starts at 0, 0, 0, but then we lifted the whole thing up by 100. And now for the size of the box collider here, I can go in here and I can play with the sliders here. So I can give this thing a height and a width. Let me give it like a width of like 250 because I think that's what our terrain is. And we can actually even move the center up and down. There we go. So now what I've done is I've put a solid wall, an invisible wall, on the edge of the terrain. And then instead of leaving this thing as game object, let me call this, I'll call it like wall 0 or something. And now let's say I want to add another wall to it. I can just right click on this and say duplicate, and now let me move this thing to the other side of the terrain, and I'll rename it wall 1. And let's duplicate that again, and we'll call it wall 2. Now let's rotate this guy. How do I rotate this guy? Well, remember we've got the rotate tool up here. I could just kind of click on that and kind of arbitrarily rotate it, or I could actually just go in here and into the rotation field, and I can enter 90, and let's see, what would the x coordinate be? 250. Nope, that wasn't it. Okay, just leave it at 0, and then let's move the thing. There you go. And let's duplicate that guy again. I'll call it wall 3, and move it that way. So now, and also one other thing I'll get to here about the water. So now I should not be able to run off the edge of the terrain. Yep, see, I've hit a solid wall. I've hit that solid wall. So that's how you can keep the player constrained to the terrain. Now, the other thing is here, when people add water to their terrain, they think, oh, well, I should be able to go in the water, and then everything will turn blue, and I'll swim. No, that's a big problem, right? The water is just a plane. That's it. You can see that nothing has changed. The only difference between being above water and being underwater is that I can kind of look up through the water. That's really the only difference. So adding a water plane into your scene does not magically create some sort of underwater physics or something like that. So, you know, I would be knowing that, what I would do is actually put sort of a box collider, something with a box collider on it, or a sphere collider, or a whatever cylinder collider in here, so the player can't actually go in the water. Maybe they can just kind of wade in a little bit, but they can't go swimming, right? That's a totally different problem, and that's really it's not something that's really worth tackling. So so that's how you can keep the player at least on your level, and if your water is deep enough, you may want to also put some objects in your scene just to keep the player from going into the water here. So actually, you know, let's just kind of play around with that. So let me add a cylinder here for a 3D object, and maybe I'll scale the thing up to be like super huge. What if I put it in like, you know, 75 tab 75 tab, oops, and then 75, make this thing really big, maybe even bigger than that, right? So, you know, I can kind of play around with the dimensions on this thing. I guess it's the Z dimension that I really want to be playing with. There you go, right? So you can see what I'm doing here. You get the concept, right? And now what I can do is put oh, it's even got a collider on it, okay, and then what I can do is just turn off the mesh renderer. So there's this invisible object there that's solid, but I just can't walk through it. Or it's solid and I can't walk through it, but it's not being drawn because I just disabled the mesh renderer on it. So that's how you can keep people out of the water and avoid that problem of having, you know, people think, oh, well, now I'm going to go under the water and I'll be able to swim and the whole world will be blue and I'll float and whatever. So there you go. I mean, that's I think we've got some pretty decent terrain here. If you could make something that looks like that, that would be super awesome. You could probably even do better and add some extra terrains, find some cooler assets, make your terrain a little bit bigger. But that is certainly enough to get you started in the world of Unity terrain making. Ha! Just when you thought I was done, I'm back. Now let's actually make sure that we save this whole project. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to save the project, but I also want to save the scene file. And you can see that I've got this thing here called sample scene. So let's, you know, I don't even really like the name sample scene. Can I rename it? Doesn't seem like it's going to let me rename it, which is a pain in the neck. However, I also want to say, okay, so I guess I saved everything. Sometimes what will happen is people will save a project, open it up, and the scene file won't load, and they'll think they lost all their work. All they need to do is load the scene file. But just be careful about, just make sure that you're saving both your project and your scene, and you should be okay. All right, there you go. If you have any problems getting that to work, just email me or let me know.